Hello, hello. Welcome back to The Mill. My name is Rachel Ballatori, the founder and CEO of Mill & Co. Very excited to have a super cool guest with us today, Andrew Mitchell, who is the co-founder of Northlight AI. Andrew's pronouns are he, him, and his. And as president of Northlight AI, Andrew is an emerging leader of practical artificial intelligence and innovation, specializing in closing the gap between advanced technology and real-world application. He's passionate about using AI to make a real difference, helping organizations, especially small businesses and nonprofits, simplify their processes, make smarter decisions, and see meaningful results, all while keeping ethics front and center. He lives in the Seacoast region of New Hampshire with his wife, Amy, and his two children, Augie and Beatrix. Andrew, it's great to see you again.
It's great to see you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm
Yeah,
excited to do this.
thanks for popping on. So just to start, give me a brief intro of what Northlight AI is.
Yeah, so Northlight AI, sort of the high level, is we're a AI solutions company focused on empowering real businesses with real practical AI solutions. So there's a lot of interesting theoretical stuff going on out there, which is also very exciting. But for us, we're looking at how do we use some of this research and this technology to actually help people in meaningful ways. As you know, being a small business is stressful. It comes with its own headaches, and AI certainly won't solve all of that.
Never.
But we think there's a lot to be done if we sort of focus the lens a little bit on the smaller groups.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of, like what is a solution or what's a common challenge you see in some of these smaller businesses?
Yeah, so with small businesses, especially when I started this, you're kind of doing everything, right? So one day I'll be building a strategy for a potential client, and the next day I'm ordering paper clips so that our office has enough office supplies. So I think with small businesses and nonprofits, there's often people who are really spread out in terms of what they can do and what they can do well. A lot of repetitive tasks, a lot of sort of boring, onerous tasks that there are technologies out there that we can move away from some of those more boring, onerous tasks. And so for a classic example is I met with a nonprofit and they were wondering how AI could help with fundraising, right? And so we did everything from building out a social media calendar on how and when to reach out to certain people. We went through ChatGPT, we went through some of these other tools and showed them practical ways to hopefully get donations. In fact, the day after the workshop, a guy reached out and said he used one of our tricks and got $500 right away for the nonprofit, which was super exciting. So,
Wow.
yeah.
You know what's cool too, Andrew? Like, the AI landscape is constantly changing. And especially as a small business where you've got a lot of folks who wear a lot of hats.
Right.
You know what artificial intelligence is, and you've probably heard the name ChatGPT, but you often aren't connecting the dots between this is a business challenge I'm having. Here's a potential solution through a specific software or platform or whatever. And so to have you all as the North Light, I get it. That guiding light of like, here's some of your options to achieve these things. Here's how we can automate some of these more redundant, repetitive tasks that are occupying a lot of time. And to build out a social editorial calendar, you're either hiring an agency, or you have to hire someone that knows how to do that, or it's being done poorly by someone who's like, I think that this is what we need to do because we need to get out there on social, but we don't know where to start. So I see a ton of value in being able to just provide that kind of connective tissue between here's what you got going on, here's a couple solutions.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, exactly it. And I joke that the number one response I get when I talk to people about AI is I'm terrified. And the number two response is I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very reasonable and understandable. There's this major paradigm shift in technology, and there's not really ways to ground it for a lot of us smaller businesses and nonprofits,
Yeah.
etc.
Could you get me like an AI robot to do dishes, laundry, and take my dogs for a walk? Because if that's a small business challenge I'm currently having, Andrew. So
If I build that, I'm going to use it for myself first, and then I will. Yeah, and what's interesting is we joke about that, but I read a quote, and I'm sure I'm butchering it. It was from an analyst at Gartner who basically said technology no longer is just technology. It's an ethical decision. It's a moral decision. It's a human decision. And so I think maybe something we'll even talk about today is that we built AI to hopefully automate and ease some of these really cumbersome, boring processes that we all have to deal with. But at the same point, AI is now reaching its tentacles into other things, creativity. There's a lot of ethical issues going on with it too. So I think it's a really actually good way to start the conversation is where, as an organization or as a person, where is the benefit for AI? Is there a benefit? Is there an ethical use case or not? And I would argue that, yeah, hopefully AI starts shifting more towards those tasks that we want to give up agency of, and not tasks that, like art or writing or
Right.
communicating with one another. That's the stuff that we want to hold on to.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it. That's really fascinating. And I'm curious, what led you to Northlight AI? Were you outside looking at the Northern Lights? Was it, just like an epiphany that you had one day? Like what was there a specific moment or element of inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so I would say it's two separate moments that sort of crossed each other. The first was actually totally a place of fear. So my background is creative writing. I'm a published writer. I ran and edited a creative magazine, and I started to hear all this stuff about generative AI, and I experimented with it a little bit, to make art and to try to write some things, and it was pretty shocking at the stuff it could do. So I actually that's kind of my personality. When I'm really scared or freaked out of something, I need to learn everything I can about it.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time just learning and researching, and coinciding with that, my role, I've worked for the University of New Hampshire for years, and my last role there was at the Center for Business Analytics. And so that was a consulting agency, essentially, that worked with companies on real projects, real needs. And I was sort of delegated to lead the AI charge a bit. And what I quickly realized is that this is its own separate universe. You can't sort of there's not too many shortcuts you can use to dive into this safely or even ethically. So I just started becoming more and more interested. I started experimenting with way too many tools and platforms and technologies. And finally, once I found my focus a little bit, I just realized this is something I wanted to do and that I thought I could be good at as I worked with others.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's like a moment of self-discovery, truly. Like
For sure.
I think any entrepreneur that I've spoken with, myself included, when I started Mill and Co, it's because I had this moment, this light bulb inside me, this like aha of, I think I can do this better, differently, in a way that gives me the lifestyle that I want, solves things that I see that others don't see, you
Right.
know, and I'm building something that's actually going to make a difference versus just existing for the sake of it and making money because people think that they need it, you
Right.
know?
Right. No, that's exactly it. I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that any technologies should serve an actual business purpose or an organizational purpose. And so I think a lot of us are with AI, we're all eager to jump in, but there's some cases where we don't need it or shouldn't use it. And that's just as important to explore as anything else.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you're that beacon for people. Um, what would you say sets you apart from competitors? And are there competitors that are doing what you're doing in terms of like AI consulting for small business?
Yeah, so I think there certainly are competitors. I would say maybe one thing that sets us apart is, and I think this surprises people to hear, is sort of our innate skepticism with AI. And I joke that I know that sounds probably, it's like when I watch those ghost hunting shows. I don't know if you've ever watched a ghost hunting show, and
I
somebody will
have.
say, I'm the biggest skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. And you go, no, you're not. You just bought $100,000 worth of ghost hunting equipment.
Yeah.
Um, but the reality is with AI, I come from a humanities background, a liberal arts background, and there's a lot of concerns I have about the technology and about what it can do or should do. And so I think one thing that sets us apart is we're not just a technology company where we're coming in to build these little processes, jam them down your throat and move on. We're really trying to think of how do we make work better? How do we empower organizations to use tools that until recently only Amazon and Microsoft could afford? I mean, that's the exciting part too. We have tools right now that for $30 a month, you can do things that only billion-dollar companies could do 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's fun too. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying I think there are lots of other people who are interested in the space or exploring the space, but our focus tends to be on more than just a sort of quick hit approach or quick hit solving problems. We really want to think about it more deeply.
Yeah. Well, and you've got business sense. It's not like you said, you're not just putting a band-aid on a scratch. It's like, well, what did we do to cause the boo-boo in the first place?
Right.
Like let's avoid that in the future. And then in the meantime, here's things that we can do to solve the challenge, and then also things to put into place and implement now so that that challenge maybe doesn't arise in the future.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Are there specific industries that Northlight works with, or you mentioned nonprofit, small business? Are there verticals that you have? Are you fairly industry agnostic?
In theory, we're pretty industry agnostic. Probably our most frequent industry is manufacturing and retail. There's a lot of potential use cases that are already being used and explored in those two sectors. Nonprofits we're really passionate about. One area that we haven't really got into, but I personally hope we can get into, is hospitality and food service, which may sound a little strange, AI and technology in that realm, but I come from a family of restaurant owners, small business owners, and you have, that's one of the biggest industries out there. It employs more people than any other industry, I think. And I think it's a classic example of how do we bring technology to groups like that, to industries like that, to start using this in a way that allows them to focus on what they're good at, which is making food, delivering customer experiences, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We do work, I should say too, I'll back up a little bit and say we work with larger organizations too, or consortiums too. We're certainly not against that. But in our experience, a lot of those larger organizations, they have the infrastructure in place to build out AI protocols and use cases. They have the team, they have the CTO, they have the strategy. Small businesses may not have that.
Yeah. Or the big businesses are like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Yeah,
which is what I see a lot. And it's, some of the smaller businesses, even if they're, small means different things. Small is potentially lower revenue, small could be fewer employees, right? Like,
right,
to me, it's more about being nimble and innovative, and you can be any size to
right.
have that mentality.
I think I learned late. I probably learned this too late, but I mean, small business, anywhere from $5 to $50 million in revenue, depending on the industry and the company. So we're not just talking about your sort of mom and pops; those are great too. But these are well-established companies that they need that support and they need that help.
Yeah. What would you say are some challenges or hurdles currently with AI that you wish could be fixed or evolved sooner than later?
I would say one of the main issues is this paradox of, at least in my belief, AI is both smarter than people realize and way less smart than people realize. And so what I mean by that is that some of the stuff it can do, AI can do, is unbelievable. Recognizing patterns at scale, recognizing stories within billions of different data points, that's really exciting. But at the end of the day, AI doesn't have human reasoning. At the end of the day, it is very much a tool, I think, meant to enhance human beings and human creativity, not replace.
Yep.
Although I do think there will be the replacements. I think that's the other thing that's frustrating too. There's so much misinformation. It's almost like you have the pro AI side who says, don't look behind the curtain. Everything's fine. Nobody's going to lose their job. This is just going to make everything better. And then you sort of have the anti group that's AI is ruining the planet. It's doing X, Y, Z. There's both some validity there. And I think the problem with that, though, is that nobody's really hearing each other. And so the technology is here. It's going to stay.
Right.
How do we sort of better articulate the challenges and the use cases? And I think even among my friends, there's so much disinformation out there. And for both people who are proponents and really anti AI. And so I wonder, I guess one thing I would hope to have better clarity on is this could further the gap between small and large businesses if we don't sort of address some of these foundational things first.
Right. And I'm curious too, I mean, from a governance perspective, copyright perspective, legality perspective, like what measures are in place? And is that something that clients should be concerned about if they're using AI to develop an editorial calendar and they're both a nonprofit supporting dogs in the northeast area of the United States? Like, are there concerns that they're going to get similar content? And is that even a concern? Are people just like, well, the expediency and time saving of it outweighs the fact that like we in New Hampshire may be posting something borderline similar to what they're posting in Virginia?
I think that's honestly, I think that's one of the most worrisome things about content generation in the age of AI. And you being in this industry, you've probably seen it, but there's this shift towards very homogenous content. It has a certain flavor. One thing I always joke about when I see a post that starts with, in the age of digital transformation, something like that. I mean, it's almost certainly, it's like every model writes with that. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do think that's very much a concern. And I think, though, part of the concern, though well founded, is that's usually from people who are using it without digging a bit deeper into how it works, how to make it more creative, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I think that's a huge problem. I mean, LinkedIn right now, there's whole industries devoted to here's how you can rip off other people's content and repackage it as your own. That to me is one of the strangest, more troubling things is that it used to be people would be embarrassed to talk about that. And now it's, here's how you find tweets and copy tweets. Here's how you do X, Y, Z. And
Wow.
I can taste the AI flavor in so much of what we do and so much of the writing that I think that's going to be an issue to be solved for sure.
I think you're right. I think you've kind of hit it. Because we do a lot of brand messaging. I don't see a world in which I would ever replace that with any sort of machine because to me, it's so specific. It's so personal. It's based on so many variables, conversations, auditing. At some point, if it can replace what we do as human beings, then Mill & Co's in major, major trouble. But I've always had a real ethical problem with it when brands that use it for that reasons. But I think you've hit something really interesting, which is the prompt generation is in direct correlation with the quality of the output that you receive, input and output. And so, it's clear when someone's been like, write me a LinkedIn post about financial wealth management, and that's it.
Right.
And then they just copy and paste whatever they got. But if you add in things like, I'm a young wealth manager. I'm looking to target people between the ages of this and this who likely have at least one or more children. They like to go on luxury vacations. They want to do these things. I'm looking to just promote myself. And I'd also like a call to action that they should contact me. And here's a link that they can use. All of a sudden, it's way more specific. And you've kind of written it yourself in a way. And the way that I even tell our own clients when they ask us about AI is it's a tool for expediency. It's not the solution.
Right.
You got to look at it.
Right.
Because in our instance, our clients are asking us from like a content generation perspective, and we're like, well, we're for what we call like slow content that's done by a human being in the form of a copywriter from start to finish. But if you need something quickly and you can't afford it or you don't want to spend that money, I think the prompt education is also a really important piece, especially to smaller businesses that are looking for expediency.
For sure. And I know this is kind of strange, me turning it back on you, but like if you were to say, what is your passion being in this industry, would you say, Rachel? Your biggest... I have a point, I promise.
My passion. I love light bulb moments when I can tell someone their why.
Yeah.
Which is why their customers or consumers engage with them. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
And I think so I bring that up because that's a prime example of, I think, how everybody should view this technology, is that ultimately AI should give you more time to focus on that piece, on articulating brand, telling the story, identifying opportunities. And so AI should not replace that piece, but it should be able to get you there theoretically quicker. As a quick aside, I worked on a project that basically it took 30 hours a month of this woman's work and automated it. And she
Wow.
was very, very freaked out, understandably. But the reality was, is it was actually very boring, tedious sort of Excel spreadsheet work. And what ended up happening, and I don't certainly don't think this is the case all the time, is that she, once this was automated, she had those 30 hours back to focus on real conversations, real client work. She didn't realize, I think, how miserable that 30 hours of really boring Excel, stuff that has to get done really was, and how much maybe that sapped her energy from the things she was most passionate about. So
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about, is figuring out what's the why for why I'm doing this, and using AI to get you there more efficiently, quicker, and safely.
Yeah. What's your pitch to people who are a little bit more adamant, like how do you talk to people about that who are pretty staunchly against using AI for whatever their reasons are?
I genuinely don't have any interest in converting people one way or the other. And I will tell you the reason for that is, to this day, I haven't fully fleshed out my feelings or understanding about AI.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I'm sure I'm butchering here, by Upton Sinclair, which was basically something along the lines of that it's very difficult to get people to see sort of moral, ethical issues or dilemmas if they're profiting from those moral issues and dilemmas, right? So it's very hard to get people immersed in AI to own up and admit to some of the problems that are happening with AI if they're benefiting from them. Um, to this day, it's something you have to sort of wrestle with, and so I tend to say, we've taught classes, we've done corporate trainings, and I tend to start everyone off by saying, if you have skepticism or you have concerns about AI, know that you're closer to the truth than a lot of people may think. And so the goal here is for you to decide what to use or not to use. If it's helpful, great. If it's not helpful, though, the last thing we want to do is make somebody miserable in their own work because they're giving everything to AI that they used to enjoy or used to like doing before.
Yeah, yeah. It's just kind of it's a more efficient way to get things done. I know that even just the early days of ChatGPT, we used it to research local animal shelters because we were going to do a day of caring, and that would have taken me a few hours to sort through everything and add in the different layers of complexity and have to go to all their websites and pull all their emails and phone numbers, and in minutes I had all of that exported from ChatGPT
Yeah, yeah,
for something that is like, right, you're right, like the passion to me was we want to give back.
right,
The slowdown was I don't have 8 hours to spend sifting through the internet to figure this out and then get content information, then have to manually call everybody and do all those things.
right.
Um, it was fantastic, and again, that was like one of the first use cases I personally had of ChatGPT, and I was like, okay, we're onto something.
Right,
And,
right.
and talk to the people about the more that people are using platforms like ChatGPT from like an algorithmic perspective. Is that platform just getting smarter? The more that we're using it, the more that we're prompting it collectively as a population, is that becoming smarter?
Theoretically, it's supposed to be getting smarter. It's supposed to be learning and training and well, I shouldn't even say theoretically. It is in many ways getting smarter. I mean, what ChatGPT can do now versus what it could do a year ago or 2 years ago is is pretty unbelievable. It's pretty remarkable. That said, there's also plenty of information and plenty of data coming out that's saying, we're running out of models and data sets to train these machines off of. And so there's actually areas within ChatGPT that it's getting a little bit worse, maybe than you would expect. So it's hard to say for sure. I think ultimately it is getting better, but ChatGPT is sort of the default that everybody talks about. I think what's interesting is some of these other models that are coming out and are challenging ChatGPT. Like Google has come out of nowhere. That's a ridiculous thing to say, that Google has come out of nowhere. But
Yeah.
when it comes to AI, I perhaps incorrectly, I always saw them as sort of lagging or sort of outside of the
Yeah.
conversation. And
So did I. Yeah.
within the past few months, I would say they've taken the lead. I mean, some of the stuff they're doing is just unbelievable, highly accurate, interesting. novel ways of doing things. So it should be getting smarter. I think we're going to keep seeing examples of where maybe it falls apart. I don't know if you heard, there was an example of a lawyer who used ChatGPT for a case and ended up citing a fake decision from ChatGPT, just made it up. And so that was a little awkward. So yeah, there's going to certainly be instances where it's not working.
I mean, there's a thing called due diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, that's why anyone I talk about using AI platforms and tools is for expediency and efficiency. Right. It's not the end all be all solution. It's not a copy paste. Because if you use it that way, you're going to run into that. You run into copyright issues. You run into the risk of not having enough prompts, and then you have kind of competing language. At least from a content generation perspective, which is where we sit. I'd love for you to share, knowing that you're a well-read human being. Are there any books, podcasts, or resources that have just been really helpful to you that you would recommend to others to read or listen in on?
Yeah, so I read a book by her name's Kavita Gannison. It's called The Business Case for AI. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. She's actually, because of that book, we asked her to be on our advisory board at Northlight, and she's part of that. But it's an incredible book in that it is direct, clear, but it doesn't ever come across as patronizing. It assumes that the audience going in knows a lot, may not know all the technology, and I think does a really good job at explaining specific use cases and ways to use AI. So I definitely recommend that. In fact, I bought a big case of those books and gave them out to all of our student interns to read.
Oh, cool.
Because it's, for us, some people are just interested in the technology, but if it doesn't actually tie to business or to a practical use case, what are we even doing?
Right.
And another book I've read, well, I should say I'm finishing it now, is Drive by, I think it's Daniel Pink. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but
no.
It's a book rethinking this idea of what motivates people at work. And the old sort of carrot stick approach is gone. It used to be that a lot of tasks were more algorithmic in nature, right? So you had an assembly line in the early 20th century. This is what needs to be done. Go from point A to point B to point C. There wasn't necessarily a lot of creativity involved in that. And so that approach may have worked more back then, that sort of reward or punishment approach. Mm-hmm. What this book talks about, I think this is what is so interesting about AI, is that so many of these tasks are moving to more heuristic tasks where there's more than one answer. There's not necessarily a clear playbook for how to tackle it or use some of these things. And so AI, I think, can give people more autonomy over their work, make them feel more These are very important things to people. And that the research is showing that people are actually more interested now in autonomy and meaning and intrinsic reward than maybe we previously thought.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I try my best to take that approach with my team, is allow the autonomy to say, just because I started this company and own it does not mean that I know everything. Right. There's so much that I'm still learning, and there's so many pieces of the business that, as other project managers, the director of marketing, account executives, freelancers, whoever we're working with, they're going to shine lights on things that are really important to come back to me to say, oh, great.
Right.
Love that idea. Please go run with it. Let's make this efficient. Let's make this easier. Bring that to me and have that kind of be the motivator versus say, if you don't do these things, you're fired, which is such school and operate out of a place of fear-based employment. I've been in that position, and I don't want to put my team in that position. So I love that. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, and I should add quickly too, because it was one of the more interesting studies, to sort of paraphrase it a bit, but they basically took two groups and said, here's your items and here's your tasks. So the items were a candle, a box of thumbtacks, and matches. And the idea was, you need to be able to hang the candle on the wall using only these materials. And so what's interesting is the people who were rewarded financially for that, where that was their main driver, actually performed worse than the people who just did it to solve the intrinsic challenge of it. And so really what ends up happening is you find out, okay, we take the box of thumbtacks, we pour out the thumbtacks, We put the candle in the box and then thumbtack the box to the wall. And so by the way, I'm not advocating that we shouldn't be paid well for our work or anything like that, but the idea was the people who are given that autonomy and that push towards intrinsic value of solving the problem, thinking through the problem, performed better than the people who just said, here's the reward if you do it correctly.
Right. Right.
So I think about that all the time when I'm working with my team.
I love that. I majored in psychology in college, and I love things like that because it's true. Like that's human nature. If businesses can take a minute to pause and reflect on their own operations, which is a lot of the clients you're working with, they're going to be more successful. When you're having a little bit more of a internal reflection on
Right.
your efficiency, your operations, your team, and growth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, what's next for Northlight AI? What can we expect?
Well, we have we're working on some products. I can't share too much about what those are, but me and my co-founders were building some pretty interesting products related to the grant writing space and to fundraising and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's super interesting. I love that piece. We have some other projects sort of in the pipeline that we're waiting to hear back about. But for now, the focus is pretty much the same. We're doing training, we're doing development, we're working with these companies. In fact, I think I mentioned earlier, we have this training and development partnership with the university. So we're trying to offer very affordable, flexible training in this space. Because ultimately, before you start messing around with things too much, you have to have a basic understanding of what you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what's fun is we don't necessarily know fully where we'll be this year. I mean, AI is continuing to take us in strange, fun, new places. So
Yeah. Isn't that fun?
it
I
is.
love the
I
deep,
love it.
dark unknown, Andrew. That's where I thrive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so nice to be out of that sort of prescriptive mode
Yeah.
of do this, do that for this result, and just think about what does the client actually need? What do our partners actually need before we try to solve anything? Are we really listening and understanding what that is, and then build the solution around that? So I love that part of it.
What you just described is your exact example that you just gave. You're now in the room of here's the box, here's the thumbtacks, here's the candle, figure it out.
Exactly.
You
That's
know,
exactly it.
and that's a good room to be in.
It is.
Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
there with you, my friend.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. This is so fascinating to me. I can't wait for this podcast to be shared with everyone. For all those who tuned into the mill, again, thank you so much for watching. Andrew and Northlight AI will be tagged in all of our copy. Please check them out and reach out to Andrew if you have any questions at all about how Northlight might be able to help your business.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Till next time.
All right. Bye.